everyone. Welcome back to the Shuffle Bus. It's Jesse here again with you. And today we're going to be doing a deck tech on a Phoenixborn that's not getting a ton of play, but I think might be uniquely positioned in the meta to basically compete. And I'm not sure she's actually tier 1 in comparison to other Phoenixborns that are working in this same archetype, but I do think she carries a unique ability on board that has some interesting play that happens in the very first few turns of the game, which the other Phoenixborn tends to be a little bit more control-oriented and responsive. So she's really in a position where, and I'm specifically referring to Aradel here, Aradel's in a position where she can definitely have better board presence and board control than Namine can, who we're going to talk about here a little bit more. But I do think that Namine has some uniqueness in her PB ability on her card, and Encore is certainly more powerful than Blue Jaguar, and we've seen in competitive play where Blue Jaguar has been left out of many lists, and I think Encore, as part of the cards slotted in your list, gives you a lot of flexibility and anti-mill synergy. Okay, so let's talk about Namine for a little bit here. We get a pretty decent life pool, 16 or 17 life, so one more than Aradel. That's not irrelevant when we're talking about these fast matchups. We have a battlefield of 6, so we do sacrifice a couple of battlefield slots. Battlefield 6 can get clogged. There's no doubt about it. And a spellboard of 4. So spellboard of 4 is exactly the same as Aradel, and we've seen 4-book archetypes be extremely strong. So I do think that she's pretty well positioned in stats. Call Me Melody is obviously not Water Blast. I want to be really clear about it. Water Blast is an extremely powerful single nature class die spend to be able to do 2 damage to a unit on the board, and obviously Call Me Melody is not that. What Call Me Melody is a potential early game answer to Brennan's Spirit Burn and James's Ally pickup tool. Both of which enable really fast Widow's Rush opens. So, Call Me Melody. Side action and exhaust, and for a single sympathy die, draw 1 card. You may place 1 exhausted token on this card, and then 1 exhaustion token on target Phoenixborn. Now, the key to this is it's a May. So you don't have to do it if you don't want. So it just makes sympathy draw a little bit cheaper, which is extremely nice when you're up against 3-Eyed Owl. Which is also tends to be a menace in the meta a little bit, where lots of owls. Owl is just a card you have to be in response to all the time, and so being able to trade class die for class die without meditation really does give you a nice answer to the owl discard. Now you're going to just discard the card that you draw to owl. You're not intending to actually get to use this card, but it saves you. It costs you a dice, but saves you your first 5, and so you can play a first 5 against owl that is 9 dice. And you'll see when we talk about first 5s for this deck a little bit later that there are certainly other, there's plenty of room in the deck from a first 5 perspective when you're playing against Owl to be able to do this. Okay, so the other component of this is you may place 1 exhaustion token on this card and then 1 exhaustion token on the target Phoenixborn. So she'll end up with 2 exhaustion tokens if you use this component. So you'll have your main exhaustion token from the Call Me Melody draw card. But then if you choose to do the second exhaustion token on Namine, then you can actually put an exhaustion token on your opponent. It's Phoenixborn. Now where this is like a little mini choke, right? So it's not obviously choke where you can do a point of damage, but you don't have to first 5 for it, which is nice. It means that you can play a regular first 5, and you're able to go ahead and exhaust Brennan's Spirit Burn in round 1, which seems really critical to sort of turning on the Brennan Widow's plan. And just that last bit of damage that Brennan tries to push through. The second component of this that I think is really critical is when you talk about James. Now, James tends to, in my experience, be a Phoenixborn that on the first turn of the game, James will, do some stuff, probably play an ally, and then they're going to, either use their ability to pull an ally back out of their deck for the cost of the life of the ally they pull out of their deck, or they're going to meditate and get a bunch of things ready to go so that on the next turn they can side action pull their second ally and play the ally right away. So traditionally we see this as like a Raptor open, right? And so, if you're thinking about it from that perspective, James tends to be a little bit slower than Brennan in use of the ability. And so because of that, it actually gives Calming Melody that much more of a window. Now, even if you miss the window, one of the things that's kind of interesting about this is James likes to use his ally recursion ability pretty much throughout the whole game. So it's almost very common that because it's free, that every round the opponent's going to be pulling that out. So if James does get to use his ability, then you can Nominee. And Nominee will put a second exhaustion token on James, and that'll effectively remove James's ability for the second round, which can really hurt James's tempo at the end of the day, because James likes to play with essentially 6-card hands. So it's a really interesting concept. I can't say I've got a ton of testing against the James matchup to know whether or not Calming Melody is good enough in round 1 yet, but it's certainly worth exploring and considering, and thus the reason I'm bringing this video to you all today. All right, now, loyalty card-wise, obviously we've talked a lot about loyalty cards, and I think that in the scope of loyalty cards, obviously Encore is not very high up there. It's not extremely powerful, but it's hard to value the weight of Encore specifically because it's a toolbox card. So for Encore in particular, when we start talking about Encore and this card that Namine brings to the table, it allows you to search your discard pile for any card that's not an Encore, place it on top of your deck, or bottom if you'd want. I'm not sure how many times anybody ever puts a card on the bottom of their draw pile, but maybe if you're facing a certain mill condition where you're going to get the top card milled, but even then, because you get to draw the card right away. So I'm not sure what the bottom draw pile component is. I have never bottomed a card. I wouldn't expect anybody to ever bottom a card. If you do bottom a card, let me know in the comments down below, why did you bottom a card? Because I'm very curious about it. So, all right, so that's pretty much it. This is a main action cost. That's powerful. It's expensive in the main action side, but it's free. It's a free card. So, like, it doesn't cost you any mana, it doesn't cost you any dice to make it happen. So, like, to me, this is a great resource for bringing back that thing that's in your discard pile that gives you a lot of value. And it allows us to sort of trim the deck down to the point where we don't have to run 3x copies of a lot of things. We can run 1x copies, even 2x copies, and get consistency, because Encore essentially serves as a 3rd, 4th, 5th version of those cards, or even up to the 6th version if it's a 3x copy kind of card for you. All right, so now let's get into the deck a little bit. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because the deck itself is still relatively a shell and trying to be developed. I've ran this. What inspired this deck was I had to play a version of this deck in Carousel. Basically, I got Nominee in these 3 dice colors, and so I had to build a deck off of that. And so in the Carousel, I started exploring this idea of a 4-book with the burn package, right? We've seen the burn package in a lot of things, and what is the burn package for maybe somebody that's new to the competitive Ashes meta? That's basically 3x copies of Molten Gold, 3x copies of Final Cry, 3x copies of Sympathy Pain. That's the burn package. So you spend these 12 cards to basically build a burn package. Any Phoenixborn can run those cards. So you can run burn in any Phoenixborn and get effect and effective value. It's just a matter of whether or not those cards impact the rest of your deck's plan. And if so, then what are you facing down, or what do you have to worry about? So in Nominee in particular, I didn't go all in because of the Encore. I went all in on the Molten Gold because I think Molten Gold is extremely powerful. I'm fine having 3x Molten Golds in my list, but I was able to shave 2 cards out of the burn package with 1x Final Cry cut and 1x Sympathy Pain cut. And in doing that, I was able to open up more card slots in my 30-card list, because the Encore can be those cards if I need them to be in certain situations, or the Encore can be anything else. So again, those are kind of been my plays. Now, one of the things I also should mention about Encore that I really like is Ashes is a lot of times about the number of main actions you can take and whether you can out main action your opponent. And we see really common cards like Salamander Monk and Frostbites in the meta for this exact reason. The ability to just be able to like do something with your main action. It's not really necessarily super impactful. Frostbite's kind of good. Salamander Monk very good as well. But it gives you and forces your opponent to take action because you haven't really changed the board state in some way. And that's exactly what Encore does. It does the exact same thing. Now, it does come at the cost of a card, whereas Salamander Monk and Frostbite do not. They're on your ready board. Now, obviously, the ready spells on your ready board are taking up slots, so there is some loss of like Could this be something else? But obviously, we'll get to why those things are important. Okay, so now let's just talk about the 4 ready spells really fast here. We've got Summon Butterfly Monk. This is just a single nature power die, and you get to make a 1/1 Butterfly Monk. But the cool thing about the Butterfly Monk is it's got Mend on it. So if it dies, you can just instantly heal either Namine or one of your units in play, depending on what makes the most sense based on board state. So it gives you this real flexibility of deciding how to do this. Now, understand that if your opponent casts a Nature's Wrath or Earthquake, something that does damage, they get to choose sort of the order of your effect resolution. So it could be impossible to save your own units with that, but it's always still good for just healing one off of your Phoenixborn. Obviously, no surprise, in a competitive list that has nature, we're going to see Frostback Bears. They're just too good against some of the things that happen in the meta. For one, we see a lot of mill walls, which are like Orchid Doves, Ruby Cobras, Three-Eyed Owls, that sort of thing. And when those decks present themselves, they're all 0 attack, right? So this, and Gilder's another really common unit in the meta. So Bear just being able to go past all of those things with Terrify 1 for 2 points of damage is kind of like printing 2 damage burn spell. But it's also very good at controlling boards by being able to attack into other things. And you just get a really good value unit. At the cost of the first round, it costs you 3 dice, but after that, it's a 2 dice unit. So it makes it the best quote unquote 2 dice unit after round 1 that you can play. So it's why we see so much value in Bear and why it's in almost every competitive nature list you find. We're going to save the Mirror Spirit for just a second. The Salamander Monk is another interesting unit here. Probably one of the single most efficient units in Ashes, because for essentially 1 Sympathy class die and a main action, we get to make this 1/1 Salamander Monk. Then we can take that 1/1 Salamander Monk as another main action and attack with it. And then if it dies, we get a 3rd main action out of the Monk's Spirit. Now, the Monk's Spirit has a drawback. It can't block. So you got to be mindful of not opening yourself up to a lot of counterattacks where you just got Salamander Monk's Spirit, because it can't be the target of an attack. So it is difficult to get Salamander Monks killed. I've got a plan for this, but this is something that you have to be mindful of. If you get too many Monk Spirits on your 6 battlefield, you can really expose yourself to a lot of counterattack swing damage. So you've got to be really managing your Monk Spirits. That is something that's a bit of a trick to playing the Salamander Monk, but as you learn it, and as you start to play with these more, you'll start to feel out these solutions. And they can do some really crazy, wicked things. So, all right. So as we go back here and we look at the Mirror Spirit in particular, now this is a card that has been on my radar for a little while, and I've been really testing this and really trying to figure out what is the expected value of Mirror Spirit? How often is it just a 1/2? Or is it just going to be times when it's an 0/2? And that's just absolutely terrible for us. Or is it going to have, generally speaking, as much value as any other 2 dice summon like False Demon or Winged Lioness, that sit in this sort of firm place of 1 class die and a basic, and you get to make a 2/2. Now, obviously, those cards have text on them, right? Winged Lioness has text that says stock, so you just basically make a 2/2 removal spell, very powerful against the 0/2s that exist in the meta. And False Demon has ping a unit that's been exhausted already, which is also very powerful for sure. This doesn't have that. It doesn't have that sort of come into play value, immediate impact on the board, and it's a little trickier to set up. So admittedly, this is a test card in this list to a certain degree. It does have a focus 1 ability, so that's why you do see me run the 2nd book, because it is possible I can just hard draw the focus, or I can encore the focus back. I will tell you that in my games that I've played up to this point, none of that's happened. So I'm not actively trying to focus this book, but if it happens, it's just going to be one of those nice things, and it's not terrible for a single card slot. Now, when we come back to it, and we look at the Mirror Spirit itself, what gives it so much interesting value is this X attack value. So this Reflex Aura says, when this unit comes into play, +1 status token for each exhaustion token on units a target player controls. So, okay, Jesse, what's that mean? Well, let's say your opponent's board is committed out, and they've got 4 units that are all exhausted. Maybe those are all Cobras and Owls, right? And so you're not actively attacking them because you're using your Bear to bypass for damage. Now all of a sudden you've got this Mirror Spirit that they're forced to hold one of those back as a blocker on, potentially. And you can make this Mirror Spirit into 3/2, 4/2. I've had it as big as a 5/2. There's a lot of play in that. And so by making this a 3, 4, 5 attack unit, it does some really interesting things. Number one, if you play it very late in the round instead of early in the round, like we traditionally see with the 2 dice summons in like a 4-book Aerodel, then you actually get to a place where opponents' removal and dice have already been kind of spent, so they don't have really good ways to deal with it. And you end up in this place where you just have this unit that maybe is big or bigger than playing a 3 dice unit in terms of attack power. Obviously not on the life side, of course. The life is a drawback to the Mirror Spirit, and you have to be really careful against the Odettes and Aerodels of the world. Now, I will argue he's pretty nice against Odette. If you make an Odette, if you meet an Odette with Mirror Spirit and you time your Mirror Spirit as such that you make a 2/2 or a 3/2, Odette just still takes 2 damage to move it. So you just basically spent 2 dice to do 2 damage. That's right on par, a little below par than your actual burn sweep, but you're still on plan. You're still advancing your plan against Odette, which is the burner. So yeah, I think this is a reasonable card solution. Now, there's some other really interesting things that happen when you talk about some of these fast Widow's Rush decks. If you don't effectively disrupt the Widow's Rush deck, we talked a lot about like how much damage can those do. I have some James lists that can put up 10 to 14 damage in round 1. That sounds like an enormous sum, but they also have 6 or 7 exhausted units on the battlefield. And in those scenarios, you can actually then counter swing with your own Mirror Spirit. Like if you counter swing with your bear and your Mirror Spirit, you're doing 9 as well, and you get to go first on the next turn. Now, there's some additional card play that has to happen in order for you to get the most value out of Mirror Spirit and bear on round 2. But if you can do it, you can actually kill Brennan in 2 attacks. You can do it with Mirror Spirit and bear in round 1, and then you can turn around, and if you've opened the board up, if you were able to control the board, open the board up, and allow the Frostback Bear and the Mirror Spirit, who is a 7 attack, and the bear as a 2 attack, you've done 9 and 9, that's 18. That's the game. You won the game. And that's what you have to do against the fast Brennan. So this is kind of like a little bit like I heard it described as a rope-a-dope answer. I think it's a very interesting concept that needs a lot of testing. If it's possible to pull off, I want to know about it. So let me know. Let me know that you were able to do this against somebody that was trying to fast Widow's Rush you, because I think it's really cool. All right. So now you know kind of why I made the choices I made there on the ready spells. Let's go to the allies for a second. We've got a Beast Mage, a Hunt Master, a Master Vampire, and a River Skull. Beast Mage is just another way for me to accelerate my win condition against the mill walls. That's really all it's here for. I do not want to play it on turns where I have the first player token. Obviously, I'm not going to spend 3 dice to make a Beast Mage. So those times it's going to the discard 9 times out of 10. It's going to be a meditate card, and that's what it's going to be. There are times though where, depending on how the turn is played out and depending on my dice and all these different things, I can hold this as the last card I play on the turn. I still have the first player token. And, eventually maybe get in for 2 attack on the Terrify component, which is as good as a bear. It cost me as much as the first bear I played, of course. But then it turns around in the next turn, and if your opponent can't answer that Beast Mage immediately, then you're in the same boat where you can complete or turn into 6 damage to them on your turn between your bear and your Beast Mage, or just 4 damage from the Beast Mage without the bear alongside it. So I think it's got powerful potential. It has good recovery when it's on this side. So, unless it takes a full amount of damage, it's going to recover enough damage to survive and be there and be another threatening unit. So I think it's very, very close to being on par with Frostback Bear. Very close. Now it's in ally form. Obviously, that's not as powerful as a repeatable effect like a ready spell, but it's in color, and I think that's something of value. It's just a one-off. We're not gonna play a bunch of allies in this deck because our ready spells take so much of our dice, so the allies are less of an impact. I do have a single Hunt Master. If you play Hunt Master early in the round and you have a bunch of salamanders sitting around and you get your panther, you've got this really unique opportunity to make those salamanders and your panther punch above curve, turn into 2/1s on demand, and that creates a lot of pressure on an opponent's board for sure. Like you can just hunt with 2/1s all over the place and force early PB guards, all kinds of things. So I think it's a very powerful ally that could be used in certain situations depending on board state to kind of regain control of the board when your 1/1s don't look so happy against maybe a field of 2 life units around the board. Last card here, or last big card we include is Master Vampire. I really like Master Vampire. This is basically a 3 dice removal on a stick. Because this is a 3 dice removal on a stick, it allows you to attack directly into value threats, right? You can attack into their Frostback Bear, whatever it may be. It gets the ancillary advantage of life drain to heal and extend your Phoenixborn's life. So between the Master Vampires and the Butterfly Monks, you can heal 2 or 3 damage and effectively extend Nominee's life to 20. Is that enough to beat Brennan always? No, it's not. But it's an effort, right? We're making an effort to make it harder to do that. And Nominee's +1 life over Aradel helps in this scenario as well, I think. So the last ally is River Skull. This is a chain card. You can't first 5 it. It's in the deck as a 1 of. Because it can do some powerful things sometimes. Like, imagine a turn where you have River Skull and you can't play the Beast Mage, right? You've drawn Beast Mage and River Skull and you can't play it. Or you've drawn River Skull and Huntmaster and you can't play the Huntmaster. Maybe your battlefield's too full, whatever it may be. River Skull just turns into deal 3 damage to a unit, put a 2/2 on the board, and draw a new card. All really powerful things for 2 dice. So I think all really powerful things for 2 dice. So I think it's a good inclusion. It's not necessarily key to our synergies, but it's a good start. You could easily swap this card into Raptor Herder if you wanted a more impactful ally. Raptor Herder may be better here. But I was curious about running a deck without Raptor Herders as well a little bit. So I'm wondering whether my performance in Shuffle Bus Winner with Raptor Herder leaves me questioning decks that can't fully leverage Raptor Herder. Now, this deck certainly has the advantage to fully leverage Raptor Herder between the Salamander Monks and things like that, but it still matters how many times does that Raptor Herder actually connect, how many times does the group tactics get shut off. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that consideration. So I think just making the 2/2 for 2 is also very good. And draw a card. Okay, so we do include a couple of alterations in this deck. And we'll get to those. Explosive Growth has synergy with both the Huntmaster, because it allows you to put 2 status tokens on a unit. So it allows your Huntmaster to get bigger, both attack-wise, and or allows your Huntmaster to turn Spirit Guide back on and continue to use your 1/1s to advantage. It allows the Mirror Spirit to just go to the moon. So because when you put the 2 status tokens on the Mirror Spirit, it gets +2 attack, again, right? But because Explosive Growth says it also gets X attack for each status token on it, it's really giving those 2 status tokens are worth 4 attack on a Mirror Spirit. And that's on top of what it already was. So if a Mirror Spirit was, say, a 3/2, and you add the Explosive Growth to it, the Mirror Spirit's now a 10/2. Like, it can be an absolute blowout. So why not have that as a potential card here? It's a 2 of. I'm not buying into the Mirror Spirit like top tier. I'm also very happy with Explosive Growthing a Butterfly Monk and turning it into a 3/1 and hunting bear with that. Because my opponent doesn't want to kill the Butterfly Monk always, but a 3/1's a real threat. They don't want to guard it either. And so you kind of end up trading down on dice, although the heal is worth something, but you get this pressure point, right? You get to put pressure on bigger units with units that are less effective, and that creates interesting decisions. Now, I would argue there are better ways to do this, but it is a possibility that Explosive Growth could also be played there. It's also just fine on any of these other units like Master Vampire to make it Hunt a Knight. There's just a lot of different places you can go with this. So I run 2 of Inflame. Now, we talked about this a little bit. Remember when I said that the Salamander Monk Spirit can be a real problem to manage? Inflame just says, make your Salamander Monk Spirit, which you basically, I mean, you paid like a half a dice for. So you basically pay a dice and a half to make a 2/1 that has to be blocked. Now, what this does is, in a lot of cases, your opponent can be holding back like 1 blocker, right? They're holding that 1 blocker because they know that Mirror Spirit's coming, right? And you put an Inflame on a Monk Spirit, you attack PB face for 2/1, and that blocker has no choice but to block that Spirit. They don't want to, but they're going to kill it for you too. That's the other benefit to this. You may get a little bit of damage on the unit. Great. That may help you finish the unit off later in the round, but it also can just open up that Mirror Spirit attack. So again, it just gives you a potential win condition. It's also extremely good against units that are concealed. And if somebody's trying to Voltron conceal, we haven't seen that really hit the meta yet, but it is possible that like Stormwind Sniper getting Voltroned up into some big unit that just is punching you repeatedly is a real problem. And so Inflame just gives you a card out for that. Root Armors are in the deck because I think there are times when you may want to protect your value units, right? Like I think going, okay, we've made a 4/3 or 4/2 Mirror Spirit. We can root armor it and turn it into 4/3 armored one, and that can be a real tough threat for an opponent to deal with effectively unless they're on Fade Away, unless they're on Aerodel where they can water blast it and then fester it. I mean, there's obviously matchups where that's actively bad, but root armor I think is a reasonably good card, and it's cheap and effective and can be used on whatever your best threat for a given game is to help protect it from fester removal or any other kind of soft damage-based removal. I've talked about Encore consistently. If we've got festers in the list, you've got a million ways to activate fester here. You've got 5 nature dice, so you can gladly run the frog fester all day long. You've only got 1 ceremonial, so you have to keep in mind, like, you fester, there's no master vampire play for the turn. That's just the way it works. So you have to weigh those things out. There's no final cry play for the turn either. So 5 dice into 2. I think this is a area of opportunity where you could kind of do a couple of things. One, you could pull the River Scald out and add another ceremonial die and probably be just fine in terms of your ceremonial or sympathy dice costs, with the exception of the reason why we have it in here right now is because we have 2 dice spent on Mirror Spirit and Salamander Monk. So if we're trying to play the Beast Mage, we needed 2 more sympathy dice. So you'd be giving up one of those units if you wanted to play a Beast Mage for a round, probably most likely the Mirror Spirit. So yeah, you can weigh that out in your testing and decide whether or not you want to drop one of these dice. I think you can also potentially drop one of the nature dice, but I think what's interesting about this deck in particular is it's not impossible to run feed double Molten Gold in a given turn. So like you can make a bunch of your units here. You can make Butterfly Monk, Mirror Spirit, Salamander Monk, and you can't make a Frostback Bear, or you can make a bear and leave the monk in the bin or whatever, but then you still got 4 nature dice. So you can go Molten Gold, Encore, Molten Gold. And that's really a powerful turn. Extremely powerful turn. So, I mean, your opponent has to respect that once they're within 6 of dying, it's possible that Namine can just kill them that round. And that's something that's hard for opponents to play around. That's really hard for them to play around. Okay. So, Crescendo. Crescendo is just a great blocker removal tool. What's really neat about Crescendo in my mind is, number 1, it's a secondary way for me to clear my Monk Spirits. Number 2, if I don't have Monk Spirits on the field, it allows me to make a Monk Spirit, and it allows me, and I don't have to damage the unit I'm attacking, I just have to damage a unit that I control. I do have to discard a card. But we know from talking about this that Namine doesn't necessarily care about discard as much, because Encore is basically saying I get to play with my discard pile too. And dealing 3 damage to something on their board is very, very good. It's extremely powerful. So we are soft to root armor in this deck right now. I will tell you right now that root armor is a root armored unit is going to be a difficult unit for you to deal with. Now, the trade-off to that is that Mirror Spirit can get so big. Like, you can explosive growth a Mirror Spirit to kill a root armored unit. And there may be times when that's the best use of explosive growth, depending on what that is. So, just keep in mind and use your outs, play to your outs, and do the best that you can, because you can create plenty of pressure without the Mirror Spirit being the win con, for sure. And then obviously, like we talked about already, the Final Cry Sympathy Pain. This just gives us access to another 8 damage that comes not from the board, but from just playing the game. And I think there's real power in that. It's also very likely, outside of the Final Cry, it's very likely that you're going to roll one of these 4 dice consistent enough into Sympathy Pain to make it work. So, yeah. So this is essentially a Namine 4 book, but it's also more tailored to this idea of how does Namine position herself in the meta? Can you use Calming Melody effectively against some of these faster decks? If you are going to take big, fast swing damage because you didn't get there effectively on Calming Melody, can Mirror Spirit give you the tempo you need to just return swing? I mean, there's a lot of different counterplay there. And again, I just think it's going to require some further testing. But so far in my initial testing, I've been very pleased with how this deck has performed. I'm currently 3-1 with this deck in testing. Got some descriptions here. First 5, Frostback Bear, Butterfly Monk, Mirror Spirit, Salamander Monk, and a Flex. That's a pretty standard 4-book open. So the Flex is usually Fester. I'll usually start a single Fester, because if my opponent starts a Knight, none of these 4 units, with the exception of maybe Mirror Spirit, gets there against a big Knight, right? And so you have to be able to do that, pressure that Knight. And Fester gives you the ability, if your opponent's on double knight, to be only facing down one knight after round 1 instead of 2, which is huge value. Because traditionally what you'll find on double knight openings is now they're playing something efficient to essentially make 3 attacks out of 2 knights. So killing one of those knights means that you only have to deal with 1 additional knight attack instead of 2. And that's a huge win. So again, if they root armor, not much you can do about the root armor. That's not going to be the knight that you're going to ping Fester. You're going to ping the second knight with the ping Fester. But if you can make a 2 attack and put 1 damage on that knight in some way, and that 2 attack could come on the form of a Mirror Spirit or whatever, then you still get the Fester access at that point. Okay. If you don't think your opponent is on knights, like if they don't have a big knight play, then you can, and they're not, and you don't suspect fast widows, you can easily first 5 the Master Vampire for Frostback Bear removal, or you can first 5 the Huntmaster and make more efficient unit attacks throughout the whole round. Those are opens that exist in this deck. They're completely acceptable. You are giving up Call Me Melody, so you're not drawing a card. So if you're on, if you think they're on Owl, you can't open this way. You can't open this way if you think they're on a speed open and you need to use Call Me Melody, or if you feel like you need access to a ping for some reason, you can't, like a nature ping, you can't be opening this way either. So it is a risky first 5 to open with another knight here. By opening with the original first 5 plus the 1 dice Fester, it leaves you with a Call Me Melody die and a nature ping die. And you can actually flex that around a little bit because of the basic dice sinks. So it is possible that you can actually get double nature ping, because if you open Huntmaster, for example, you've got Huntmaster, Frostback Bear will take 2. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. You can't open with the Huntmaster and do that. You have to open with the Master Vampire if you want to have double Frog Ping in round 1. Yeah, so this is an attempt at trying to explore Phoenixborn that's maybe been a little underexplored, and potentially has the possibility of being a very powerful Phoenixborn in this archetype. It's different. It plays different than Aerodel. It certainly is not playing to the board as effectively as Aerodel, but it is also gaining access to some very powerful synergy combo pieces, if you will, through Encore, because with practice, you'll actually learn what the best cards to pull with Encore is for a given circumstance. So it's not unusual to go, okay, I've got Aerodel to 10, I've got a Molten Gold in hand and an Encore in hand, or I've got an Encore in hand. What's my best play? Well, maybe the Huntmaster is also in the bin right now, and the Molten Gold's worth 3 damage, but based on this current board state and where my opponent sits, I can Encore back the Huntmaster, I can play Huntmaster and get in for 4. And you have to make those determinations based on risks and understanding what your opponent might play. So I will say that this deck will require a little bit deeper knowledge of what your opponent's doing, because it can expose you to potentially getting into some kind of funky situations. Like if you play that Huntmaster and they just put another unit in play, that was probably the wrong play. But it maybe not either. I mean, you still made 2 units that can pressure that new unit that just came into play. So those are all things that you have to sort of weigh out and determine based upon game state and understanding what your opponent's going to do, what their dice left is, et cetera, et cetera. And then you just got this back end component of like reaching for burn. And because we're using Encore, we don't necessarily need a bunch of ceremonial die to recur units. And so that really leaves us in a position where I think it's okay with a single ceremonial die. But if it really becomes a problem, you can cut one of these sympathy die into a second ceremonial. And I probably just cut River Scald into a Raptor, and you'd be really good. So, all right, well, that's going to wrap up our Nominee video here. It's been fun to kind of tinker around with this deck. I'd love to know your results. So take it out into the community, play some games on Ash Techie with it. I will include the published deck list in the comments below. If you like this kind of content, be sure to give us a thumbs up. It means the world to us. And if you really enjoy our content, nothing says more than that, than hit that subscribe button. It just knows that helps us know that we're putting out the kind of thing you want to see. I'm Jesse. It's been a ton of fun. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.